The bark that shook the cathedral, a funeral Atlanta will never forget. They buried a saint that day. But it wasn't the prayers or the eulogies that made the world stop. It was the bark. Welcome to Revenge Her Way, where justice comes wrapped in drama, and truth always finds its voice. April 3rd, 11:47 a.m. A soft rain fell over downtown Atlanta. Outside the Cathedral of Christ the Light, a sea of black umbrellas bowed to the rhythm of tolling bells, 74 chimes for 74 years of service. Inside the cathedral, no gold, no opulence, just silence, candles, and tears. That was how Archbishop John Markwell wanted it. The man who turned down million-dollar parades, who traded satin robes for flannel shirts and a cot in a homeless shelter, was going home the way he lived, humble and loved. Over 5,000 people pressed shoulder to shoulder in reverence. 30 priests led the procession, each holding a single white candle. Behind them, the casket, oak wood, unadorned, save for a small iron cross carved near the head. The cathedral doors opened. The organ fell silent. The rain paused, almost as if heaven itself were holding its breath. Then it happened. One bark, clear, sharp, piercing. And that's when everything changed. Because standing in the middle of the stone steps was her, and she wasn't supposed to be there. Not now, not ever, but maybe, just maybe, she was the only one who truly knew how to say goodbye. The first bark hit like a gunshot. 5,000 people froze, priests mid-prayer, mourners mid-tear, hands clasped on rosaries suspended in the air like time itself had hiccuped. It wasn't loud, it wasn't long, but it shattered the silence in a way no human voice ever could. The second bark came 3 seconds later, louder, clearer. It echoed off the cathedral's stone walls, ricocheted through the crowd, and lodged itself right in the chest of anyone with a heartbeat. Someone dropped a flower. Another gasped. The organist's fingers hovered mid-note, too stunned to press another key. Then the third bark. And this one. This one broke something. It was soft, strained, like the sound of a soul saying goodbye with everything it had left. And that's when people turned. There she was, a golden retriever, soaked in rain, standing dead center on the cathedral steps, her paws planted firm on the wet stone top, her eyes fixed on the wooden casket, moving slowly down the aisle. She didn't flinch. She didn't move. She just stood there, like she belonged. But no one had seen her come in. No leash, no collar. She hadn't been sitting with the crowd. She hadn't been part of the procession. And yet, somehow she had made it all the way to the front, past the barriers, past the guards, past the rows of politicians and bishops, like she knew exactly where to go. The cameras caught everything. The local news channel had been streaming the funeral live. One wide-angle drone shot, clear as day, captured her standing there, framed perfectly by the stained glass windows above and the coffin below. The internet would explode with it later. But in that moment, no one cared about going viral. They cared about why this dog was crying. A murmur moved through the crowd like wind through wheat. Whispers jumped pew to pew, eyes darting, hands trembling. A woman 2 rows from the front pressed a hand to her mouth and whispered, "That's Lucy." A man beside her turned. "Whose dog?" But she was already crying, because she knew. Lucy wasn't just a stray. She was his. 4 years ago, when Archbishop John Markwell had left his post in the rectory and chosen to live in the Midtown shelter with the unhoused, he'd found Lucy tied to a street sign during a thunderstorm. She was just skin and bone back then, limping, afraid, shaking so hard she couldn't bark. He took her in, fed her, healed her. And every night, they sat together in the back corner of the shelter's prayer room, him whispering verses, her curled by his feet. He used to call her his silent amen. No one had seen Lucy since his stroke 2 years ago. Rumor was she'd been given to another family, maybe left at a rescue. But now here she was. And she was mourning. The guards moved, finally instinct kicking in. 2 of them stepped toward her, walkie-talkies crackling, hands ready to restrain. One even reached out, but then stopped. Because Lucy didn't growl, didn't bark again, didn't move at all. She just stood, head high, shoulders tense, eyes locked on the casket. That's when the rain started again, light like mist, and someone in the crowd began to kneel. Then another, and another, until it spread like a wave. 5,000 people kneeling for a dog. The bishop carrying the final candle dropped to his knees, whispering something under his breath. Behind him, one of the altar boys started crying. A TV anchor nearby took off her earpiece and whispered, "What kind of goodbye is this?" And still, Lucy didn't move, until the casket reached the cathedral doors. Then, only then, she stepped forward, slowly, like every inch hurt, like every paw print carried the weight of 4 years of memories and 1,000 unspoken prayers. And as she walked, not a single voice dared to speak. No one knew where she had come from, but they were about to find out why she had come back. Lucy wasn't supposed to be there. 2 years ago, when Archbishop John Markwell suffered his final stroke and was rushed to Grady Memorial, someone had taken her. Quietly, without ceremony. One of the aides whispered something about a no-pets policy at the hospice. Another said she'd been sent to a rescue 2 counties away. But no one really knew. And by the time John woke up, briefly, barely, she was already gone. He never asked for much in his life. Not a name on buildings, not a bishop's palace, not even a real bed during the winters he spent sleeping beside the men and women on the shelter floor. But when they came to take Lucy, he'd gripped the nurse's hand and whispered, "Don't let her think I left." And now, here she was, standing in front of his casket, her golden coat matted with rain and grief, her legs trembling, not from fear, but something else. Recognition. She knew. And the crowd? They didn't know what to do with that. How could they? This was supposed to be the kind of send-off reserved for saints. Controlled, sacred, choreographed down to the second. But Lucy's presence disrupted all of that. She didn't care about protocol. She didn't need a program. All she needed was him. 4 years ago, on a stormy April morning, not unlike this one, John had found her half drowned behind a gas station on Boulevard. The city was knee-deep in floodwater, and she was tied to a pole with a soaked collar and a broken leg. She didn't bark then either. She just looked up at him, eyes dull with hunger and pain. He untied the rope with shaking hands and whispered, "Looks like we both got nowhere to be." And that was it. From that day forward, she followed him everywhere, except on Sundays. Sundays were for service, for sermons, for the kind of silence Lucy respected without needing to be told. But during the week, she'd curl up next to him on the cot he kept near the shelter chapel. Every night, he'd read aloud from the Gospels. She'd close her eyes when he got to the part about mercy. The volunteers used to joke, "Father John preaches to people by day and dogs by night." But he'd always smile and say, "She listens better than most bishops." Only one place was off limits at the shelter, the prayer tower. It was quiet, lit by stained glass and candlelight, and reserved for reflection. Not even staff were allowed without knocking. Except Lucy. She was the only soul John ever let inside without pause. She'd sit there, not making a sound, head tilted as if she could hear what the rest of the world missed, and sometimes he'd lean down and whisper in her ear like she was the only witness God had left. So no, this wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't a stray stumbling into a crowd. This was Lucy coming home. But how? How did she find him? Find this place, after 2 years missing, with thousands of people, guards, barriers, noise, and ceremony standing in her way? She hadn't been chipped. She hadn't been seen in months. And yet, she arrived the moment the casket crossed the threshold. Some said it was instinct. Others murmured, divine. But one man in the third row, a groundskeeper who used to sneak her bits of chicken when no one was watching, whispered something that gave everyone chills. She followed his soul. Lucy didn't need GPS. She didn't need words. She just needed to feel him. And when she did, she found her way back. The rain picked up, and the wind pressed against the cathedral doors like a breath held too long. Lucy, still standing at the foot of the casket, took a slow, trembling step forward, then another. And then she stopped. Because someone no one had seen before, was walking toward her from the far end of the aisle. The guard's hand was inches from her collar when the voice cut through the air like a blade. "Don't touch her." It wasn't loud. It wasn't angry. But it stopped everyone, stone still. Lucy didn't flinch. She stood rooted at the base of the casket, her chest rising and falling with the weight of something more than breath. Grief, maybe. Recognition. Faith. The crowd turned as one, like a single body suddenly aware of another presence. And there, at the far edge of the aisle, a man in white was stepping forward. Not ivory, not cream, pure blinding white, so stark against the sea of black suits and robes it looked almost impossible. He walked slowly, not with the stiffness of age, but the wariness of someone who had carried too many goodbyes. No one recognized him at first. Not the cardinals, not the local news anchors, not even the deacons standing beside the altar. But Archbishop John Markwell would have, because the man in white was Father Elijah. His name hadn't been spoken publicly in over 2 decades. Some thought he died in a monastery abroad. Others whispered about a falling out, a vow of silence, a choice to disappear. But he hadn't died. He'd simply stepped out of the spotlight and into the shadows where the real prayers are said. Now he was back. For one reason only. He stopped beside Lucy, knelt slowly, and placed a wrinkled hand gently on her head. Then he stood. And what he said next didn't just quiet the crowd, it broke it. When a small creature can feel the soul we pretend we can't see, we should listen, not push it away. For a second, no one breathed. One of the bishops wiped his eye with his sleeve. A child in the 4th row asked, "Is that Jesus?" Loud enough to make his mother gasp. And still, Lucy didn't move. "She knows," Father Elijah continued, "because love like that doesn't die. It lingers. It echoes." Then he looked out over the congregation. His voice cracked, but it didn't waver. "John once told me, if I ever go before she does, don't let them ring bells or build statues. Just let one creature remember me, and that's enough." He took a step toward the casket, and Lucy followed. Her tail didn't wag. Her ears didn't perk. She just moved like she'd been waiting for him all along. Father Elijah placed one hand on the casket, closed his eyes. "I was with him when he passed," he whispered, more to Lucy than to the crowd. "He didn't cry. He just asked where you were." The air thickened, heavy with things left unsaid, regrets, prayers, the kind of silence that clings to skin. Lucy circled once, slowly, then lowered her body to the floor, one paw touching the corner of the casket, her head bowed like she was praying. And maybe she was. No one tried to move her again. No one dared. Because in that cathedral filled with theologians, dignitaries, and lifelong believers, only one being seemed to truly understand what was happening. A dog. But not just any dog, the one who never forgot. Father Elijah stayed beside her. He said nothing more, just sat down beside the casket, beside Lucy, beside the weight of everything unspoken. And as the light through the stained glass shifted just slightly, painting Lucy in soft shades of violet and gold, someone from the back of the cathedral whispered, "She's not just mourning, she's waiting." For what? Nobody knew. But what happened next, no one in Atlanta would ever forget. Lucy laid her head on the casket, and the cathedral forgot how to breathe. She didn't whimper. She didn't cry. She just trembled, barely, like a candle in wind, and pressed the side of her face gently against the cold wood, as if she could feel him through it. As if the beat of his soul might still be echoing somewhere inside. And in that instant, everything stopped. The choir silenced mid-hymn. The pipe organ's low hum faded into nothing. Even the bells, which had tolled every 15 minutes since dawn, didn't dare ring. 5,000 people. Not a single one moved. A bishop dropped to his knees. An old woman clutched her rosary so tight the beads snapped. Even the priest meant to deliver the final blessing stood frozen, his lips parted, but no sound escaping. Outside, the storm clouds parted just enough to let in a single ray of light. It streamed through the stained glass window above the altar, painting the marble floor in hues of deep violet and honey gold, and right at the center, like it had been waiting for this moment all along, was Lucy. Bathed in color, surrounded by silence. She looked like a statue carved from grief. Somewhere in the third pew, a little boy whispered just loud enough for the mic to catch it, "The dog's taking him home to heaven." And no one corrected him, because it didn't feel like a funeral anymore. It felt like a passage, the final goodbye. People began to kneel, not by command, not by cue, but by instinct, reverence, like they had just been shown something holy and didn't know what else to do. The candle flames flickered, not from wind, but as if reacting to something unseen. Father Elijah, still seated beside Lucy, bowed his head. His hand brushed her shoulder, not to move her, but to steady himself. Because the weight of that silence, it was crushing. It was the sound of a world losing something it couldn't replace. Lucy stayed like that for minutes. Her breathing slowed. Her body grew still. And just when it felt like the moment couldn't hold anymore, when even the marble beneath her seemed to ache from the quiet, she exhaled one last deep breath and closed her eyes. A hush fell so absolute it was deafening. No one dared speak. No one dared touch her. It was like they were afraid that if they did, the entire cathedral might collapse under the truth of what they'd witnessed. A dog, mourning, praying, letting go, not because she was taught to, but because she knew. Some said later that the light in the stained glass window pulsed brighter when she closed her eyes. Others claimed they heard a whisper that wasn't from any mouth, something like, "Thank you." But none of that mattered, because when the final hymn resumed, soft, uncertain, like even the choir wasn't sure they should continue, Lucy didn't move. And by the time the casket was lowered, she was gone. No one saw her leave. No one heard her pause on the stone floor. She had simply vanished, like the breath of a prayer that never needed words. And yet one man at the back, the cathedral janitor, who'd cleaned the pews every night for 17 years and never missed a funeral, said he saw something no one else did. A flash of gold at the door. And behind it, a shadow that looked an awful lot like a man in a white robe. They never found her. Not in the pews, not in the gardens, not even on the long stretch of road behind the cathedral where the oak trees bend like they're bowing to something you can't quite see. Lucy simply disappeared. The cameras caught every moment, except the last. One frame she was there, bathed in light. The next, gone. No blur, no motion, just absence, like a spirit walking home. Some say she slipped through the side gate near the chapel. Others claim she never truly walked in on four legs to begin with. A child whispered to his mother that Lucy had wings. A mourner swore she heard paw steps vanish into wind. But Father Elijah never searched. He just smiled the smallest, most broken kind of smile and said, "She did what she came to do." A few weeks later, a maintenance worker found an envelope tucked behind a loose stone in the cathedral's foundation. Inside was a single page, yellowed, edges soft like it had been folded and unfolded many times. It was John's handwriting. He wrote, "If I go first, let her near. She's not just a dog. She is the last voice that ever listened when I prayed without sound. She is the amen I never said out loud. At the very bottom, barely legible, she is the only one I never lied to." They didn't read it at his memorial. They didn't put it in the papers, but they built her into the marble anyway. Right there in the prayer tower, where she used to sit in silence, beneath the arch of colored glass and the soft golden light, there is now a statue of Archbishop John Markwell, seated on his stone bench, robes folded in his lap. And at his feet, a dog, carved with such care, her ears look like they might still twitch at a whisper. Her head rests on his foot. Her eyes are closed. And the inscription, so small you might miss it unless you kneel to see it, says only this: "Love is not loud. Sometimes it just whispers and stays." I think about them sometimes, John and Lucy. How love doesn't always come with fireworks or trumpets or grand gestures. Sometimes it comes as a worn hand on soft fur, a golden blur at the end of a long hallway, a bark in the middle of a funeral no one will forget. And sometimes love just walks away quietly, knowing its work is done. I don't know what you believe about spirits, about faith, about what happens when the soul leaves the body. But I believe this: some goodbyes are too sacred for words. Some prayers are too honest for churches. And sometimes the ones we forget turn out to be the ones who never stopped remembering us. So if you've ever loved someone and never got to say goodbye, if there's a Lucy in your past or a John in your prayers, I hope this story found you like a whisper in the quiet. If it did, tell me. I'll be reading the comments like someone waiting for a bark in the dark. And if your heart has room for one more story, one more moment that doesn't need to be loud to be real, hit like. Maybe even subscribe. only if you've ever stayed a little too long at someone's grave or whispered a prayer to something that couldn't answer back. But you knew it heard you anyway.